Hey YouTube, what is up? It is me, Amaxter, and we are back with episode 19 of Behind the Mod. And for this episode, we have WayofTime, who is the creator of Blood Magic. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
It's awesome having you on the show. Thanks for coming on. So I guess before we get into the weeds, what got you started with modding, and when did Blood Magic happen?
What got me started modding was, as probably almost every single modder, I started with modded Minecraft, playing with it. One of my favorite few mods were Red Power, which unfortunately isn't around anymore, and Equivalent Exchange. So, Equivalent Exchange, as you may know, it deals with alchemy, transmuting some things from one thing to another. And eventually, after a bit of time, Reliquary, Xeno's Reliquary, came out. Both of them having a heavy influence in different types of alchemy. Now, when wanted to make a mod, it was basically a side project. I just wanted to dip my toes in it, not make any sort of releasable thing. It was just to test my skills with Java. And I wanted to make an alchemy mod that was going to be usable with those two mods. Not stepping on any sort of toes, but try to make it actually have a good synergy with them and try to fill in some gaps. Now, how blood magic came about from all that thing is that I realized that almost every single mod tended to fall between just simple magic as well as technology. And I was trying to think of some actually unique idea because at that time, basically every mod tended to have a unique idea, or else people would just say, hey, that's a copy of this, blah, blah, blah. So I decided to try to deal with just using health as a resource, not really a resource, just basically storing health in a battery, which you can then reimburse to yourself. And it kind of just went from there slowly.
Huh. Yeah, the concept of kind of like self-sacrifice to, to your health, and of course other blood sacrifices with animals, and that kind of was a unique theme, especially when it came out. And since then, we've seen some other mods kind of do stuff like that with Witchery. But where did that theme kind of come from for you?
Self sacrifice versus sacrifice, you mean? Or
Well,
what do
just
you mean?
is it in general is kind of like a concept, this concept of like, I guess, punishing yourself, or like other, basically taking, like you said, health as a resource and using that for magic and stuff.
Well, that's a tough question. It kind of evolved from wanting to eventually have more uses for this life force because life force can be pretty strong, at least with a lot of magical lore in a bunch of different medium. So it kind of came from how do you actually accumulate life force? What is the best way to get it from oneself without actually, killing themselves? Because, it's kind of not very healthy if you have to kill yourself.
Yeah.
Tends to put a damper on the mood.
Yep.
And then from that point, I just kind of had the inspiration of ritualistic sacrifices because in olden times and in some cultures nowadays, people sacrifice animals towards their deities. So it kind of evolved from that to sacrificing animals in order to empower and enrich oneself.
Yeah, I think it's definitely kind of a cool, like, I don't know, like darker theme, but it also like it definitely differentiates itself. Like if you see, just blood magic stuff, kind of blood in the altar or whatever, you're not dealing with something like Thaumcraft. But I think one of the other things that people associate with blood magic is this kind of lack of GUI and a big emphasis on interacting with blocks and items in the world. What kind of leads you to that design philosophy?
To tell you the absolute truth, complete and utter laziness.
You just don't want
Like,
to make GUIs?
when I first started, I was a complete Java noob. The only experience in coding other than the Java class that I had was a bit of C, and I didn't do any GUIs or stuff like that. And I really, at that point, since this was basically a lesson mod for myself, I didn't want to code GUIs because I didn't want to learn how to do GUIs. And eventually it became one of the quote unquote gimmicks of the mod, and it just kind of kept there until it was basically necessary in some parts, at least with the first incarnation of the mod.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because now I see like people, they really value like, oh, no GUI, so it's immersive and lots of multi-block stuff. And I guess Blood Magic kind of was the one of the first mods to really like have a lot of that stuff. And I guess you kind of it was more accident or more just kind of circumstance than really intentional at first.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't intentional at the beginning. Eventually, I kept as much GUI-lessness as possible because I wanted to keep the mod consistent with all of the other stuff in it previously. But to start off with, yeah, completely unintentional.
Yeah, that's kind of funny, but I think it's now it's like one of the biggest things that people want to see in mods, and that's kind of funny to see. With 1.8 and up, you've kind of redesigned Blood Magic, and it now has, I guess, the suffix two onto it. Was it the kind of the technical work required in redoing, big parts of your mod that inspired you to refresh it?
Well, as anybody that has coded Java or any other programming language would attest to, their first draft at any sort of code is absolute garbage. If you look at the 1.7 branch on GitHub, you can see it's an absolute mess. Originally, just to talk about the class structure a bit, all of the classes were in a single folder, which obviously nowadays people know it's a big no-no. But uh, eventually, one of the problems with Blood Magic in 1.7 was it was very end game heavy. Most of the fun stuff was at tier 4 or later, so you get a problem where everybody is basically rushing to those tiers because there was nothing whatsoever to do in the first few tiers. So uh, the 1.8 and further branches of the mod allowed me to try to redesign it so that everything is a lot more complete. Every single tier has different things that you can do. You can stay on a given tier for a long amount of time and still feel like there's stuff to do. And I felt that just simply porting the 1.7 code into 1.8, other than the messiness factor, it would still make it where I have to design the new stuff around the old stuff. Because once you release a version for the mod, it's kind of hard to take a whole chunk of the mod away.
Right. Do you think it was kind of like, I guess in 1.7 you mentioned the whole focus on end game content. Was that kind of part of, I guess, the mod's, roots and the inspiration from Equivalent Exchange that kind of led it to that thing?
Yeah, in the previous versions of Minecraft 1.5 and especially 1.2, you'd have a bunch of very overpowered mods, and especially equivalent exchange. There were the watch, to give an example, which would freeze enemies, and
Just
a
any
bunch
of the
of
rings, basically.
any of the rings. Side note: the watch of flowing time. I helped design that, so that was fun.
Hmm.
Like way back in the equivalent exchange 2 days.
I thought that
But I
name sounded
digress.
familiar.
Yeah, it was kind of named quasi after me after I gave the idea. But anyways, I sidetracked myself. So yeah, what was I talking about?
Talking about, I guess, how you kind of had this, the end game focus, how lots of mods were really overpowered back then, like in 1.5.
Yeah, so I tried to make the core of the mod was basically ultimate power for ultimate sacrifice. You have to risk yourself by sacrificing your health, putting yourself in dangerous situations in order to gain as much power as possible. And unfortunately, I put myself in a corner there because at tier 3 In tier 4, you get very powerful things. And most of my ideas at that point were okay, how do I one up myself? So that brought forward stuff like the Omega armor, the demon invasion, and strong rituals that I didn't really think. I did think about balance, however, the balance was definitely a lot different then.
Huh. So do you think as the mod kind of like matured into its own self, like obviously now, Blood Magic has its own curse category, for add-ons, it's a big mod now. Do you think as it kind of grew into its own, you kind of adopted your own balance ideas?
Yeah, I um, try to streamline everything so that it can be balanced around vanilla while also trying to take into account a bunch of mods. Obviously, there are a bunch of mod mechanics that can completely circumnavigate and not circumnavigate, basically cut through the balance of the mod. For instance, nearly free regeneration, though I guess that can be another topic. And one of the main examples that I put forward is Cursed Earth. That it's very hard to balance around, but I do try to keep my own sense of balance when trying to program new items, mechanics, as well as armor, etc.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you were on, I guess, Meet Your Maker, great show by the way. Talking a little bit about how you in Blood Magic 2, you've kind of balanced a little bit around vanilla with the whole food situation, saturation, and also combat. Aside from that, what do you think are the big kind of fundamental improvements you've made in BM2?
Well, as I mentioned before, you can start with tier 1 in the mod and feel like you're actually doing something useful. So, by introducing the demon will mechanic, I feel like I've, one, given myself more leeway in a bunch of different balancing decisions. In the previous version of the mod, you only really had, I guess, one main resource from the mod itself, as well as the normal material constraints. You had just LP, as well as how many freaking resources can I shove into a single crafting recipe. So, and as you can probably tell, it became very kludgy with a bunch of different mechanics. I'm not sure. Have you ever played with the reagent system in Blood Magic 1?
I have not. I didn't actually get to experience Blood Magic 1 much, unfortunately.
Oh, well, that's fine. The reagent system was one of those clunky things where I was trying to balance augmenting rituals with new and powerful effects. So, for instance, the ritual of magnetism, it gathers ores from underneath the ritual and just simply teleports them inside of the ritual's area. And how I balanced increasing its range was by adding this basically a gas, a reagent, which you have to craft using a bunch of different materials, using a convoluted method in order to boil it all down and then just inject it into the ritual. However, nowadays with Demon Will, I now have one more variable to play with balancing. So instead of just using LP for different things, I can now say, okay, sure, this costs some LP. However, if you want to really do some fun stuff with it, you have to use a certain amount of will. And that makes it, I feel, easier in order to balance the different things. So instead of sinking a lot of material costs into it, you can sink a bit of demon will into it instead.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting because one of the things with like tech mods is, obviously they're very metrics based. It's how much copper have you mined, how much RF can you generate, and like ultimately, in many ways, you can do the same things with a tech mod that you can do in Blood Magic. Not all the stuff, but like for example, you can build a quarry, or you can, do that ritual of magnetism and stuff like that. But I think the difference with Blood Magic is instead of building some magical block and or system of blocks to do that with Blood Magic, that's coming from the player, or it's coming from their like internal power, which is I guess one of the big features of the mod. Is that right? I guess.
Yeah, so in Blood Magic, there's something called the Soul Network, and to use the technical way to describe it, it's basically a bit of data stored in the world itself. You contribute to it, and then you can pull stuff out. Essentially, it's pulling power out of your soul, and the difference between that as compared to tech mod's power is that you can access this from wherever you are, and of course, whether you're online or offline. And yeah, it'd be actually interesting if some sort of tech mod were to adopt a similar system for their power, because I think I've only seen this in my mod itself.
I think the closest I've seen is I know Practicalities has something called a vampiric generator, which it doesn't. There's obviously nothing like a soul network in it, but I think the concept of that is you just kill mobs to get RF. So I guess some mods are slowly moving in that direction, but we still haven't really seen anything like that, especially with tech mods.
Hmm.
But I guess documentation wise, I want to talk about. I guess I think that's another improvement you're looking at making now, because lots of people weren't super happy with the way Blood Magic did that in 1.7. So, what are the main things you want to work on so that people don't have to, watch videos or read wikis? Nothing wrong with that, but I guess not everyone wants to do that. Some people kind of want like in-game info.
Well, little do people know, 1.7 Blood Magic actually did have documentation, in game documentation. There was an API mod, side mod, and it was broadcasted on the Minecraft forums page. It's called Guide API, and it's basically a library that allows me to add in game documentation without me having to code the book code itself.
Yeah, I remember Sanguimancy, which is a Blood Magic add-on. I actually had that as a dependency.
Yeah, I didn't have it as a dependency, and I was thinking maybe I should have had it as a dependency, but it's one of those cases where you add the dependency and annoy people and make them download it for something that they might not even look at, or do you simply suck it up and add it as, well, yeah, those two options. So there was documentation in 1.7. Now, in 1.9 and further, Guide API is around still, and you can download it in order to look at the current books right now.
Yeah. Uh,
Uh, mhm.
oh, sorry. Continue.
Yeah, I was just gonna add a bit onto it. Basically, current documentations for a lot of the mods that I've seen has been the tried and true, simply give a short description of it, as well as sometimes giving a longer description for the different complicated systems. So, one of the examples I can give off the top of my head is obviously the Thaumonomicon, which people compare almost all in game docs to, as well as Botania's Lexica Botania.
Hmm.
Both very good in game documentations. And what I want to do for the my mod is, instead of just giving a straight description of it, I want to try to inject lore into the books themselves.
So you kind of want to, instead of giving direct documentation, like this is what this does, you kind of want to give a sense of like story to the mod.
Yeah, so in 1.7's Blood Magic, there were five blood mages that you follow. Their titles were basically the Ritual Master to cover all the ritual stuff, the Architect for all the simple blood altar and the sigils, the Demonkin to talk about the demonology, the Alchemist for obvious reasons, as well as the Spellmaster for obvious reasons. And the books followed their research into the different areas that they were focusing on, as well as giving descriptions for what they were actually doing. So you'd see the story of how they get to it, as well as what the thing actually does by the end of their discovery. Now, what I am doing in these documentations is slightly different. I'll still have basically all the same content. However, I'll have the story portion and it'll be at the beginning of the entry. However, as soon as you see a recipe, after that recipe, you'll find all the basically quote unquote straight documentation.
Huh. So you kind of want to, I guess, well, not indirectly, but like you want to, I guess, give people that sense of like, story and that sense of like, you're kind of following these different characters of sorts, without, I guess, forcing it, like, but having it, I guess, more upfront.
I want to have it as an option that people, if they are very interested in the lore of the mod, and there is quite a bit of hidden lore that I try to inject in the mod. For instance, there's a whole metaphysical explanation of what the soul network is inside of the books. However, I don't want to alienate those people who just want to go, hey, tell it to me straight, Doc. What does this item do?
Yeah, you kind of want to let people. I guess it's like skip. I guess a good comparison maybe would be like skippable cutscenes of sorts, and but I guess
Yeah,
like yeah, in a book. Um, yeah,
too long didn't read.
yeah, basically. But yeah, I think that's a definitely a cool way to approach it. And like, do you have any like interface ideas, or do you want to keep it relatively simple and straightforward?
Well, Guide API, basically how I have it. Guide API is the add-on I was talking about. The API, it's coded by Team Amerifrance, which is composed of Tenut, as well as I think Tom Ben Potter is still on it. So all five quote-unquote books are in this one item called the Sanguine Scientium, and you can then just simply select which book that you want and then which entry inside of that book you want. And each entry has the different pages. There's the text pages, there's the recipe pages, as well as all the other pages that you'd want in it. So I'm going to basically go with simple book. Eventually, I'm going to poke them to see if I can have like fast links, like click on this link to go to a different entry in the book. But it's pretty simple right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fine. I mean, people, just as long as you have some sort of in-game thing, I think that definitely just is great for, especially, people might, I think the way people play mods nowadays, they might not just be installing Blood Magic. In fact, they probably aren't. They're probably playing it in a mod pack. So if they just come across Blood Magic, they're going to want to figure out how to use it. So I think it's really important to have resources for that in-game.
Hmm.
And I guess and so kind of want to talk, I guess, in this new world we have, this 110 world. We don't really have that many big mods like Thaumcraft ported yet. I mean, Thaumcraft did make it to 1.8, but it's as I know, Asnor is still kind of working hard on getting it past that. And there's obviously other big mods that really haven't updated. Do you think that's kind of given people, I guess, a chance to who maybe didn't discover Blood Magic in 1.7 to kind of discover it now?
Yeah, I think that Blood Magic, this version, has definitely been getting a lot more exposure than previous versions. Like, for instance, almost everybody knows this, Starwolf 20 has been playing Blood Magic on his Forgecraft series extensively, probably to the chagrin of a lot of people going, stop playing Blood Magic! But because
More
it's
tech.
more tech, I need more tech. But the problem is that up to a certain point, there just wasn't the tech. So it did give a lot of the exposure. However, slightly dampened by the fact that a bunch of people didn't want to advance versions yet because there simply hasn't been the mods. However, as a side effect, I believe that it has given the opportunity for mods that haven't been thought of yet to get a new spotlight on them. So it's been beneficial to Blood Magic as well as some of the not well known mods who have started sprouting very well.
Yeah, like one thing I've noticed is lots of, especially in magic mods, and I hesitate to use the term magic because, some mods like Botania, like, Vaskia said, are more tech mods in essence than magic mods. So they just have that skin. But these mods that I guess, let's just say, unlike tech mods, they don't depend on a bunch of other mods. Like, for example, if you're going to install Mind Factory Reloaded, you're probably going to have not only COFH core, but you're going to have thermal expansion, and you're going to have that whole ecosystem. Whereas with stuff like, like, for example, Botania was one of the big notable 1.7 mods. It was available in 1.6, but I think the mod really came into its own in 1.7. And, we've seen lots of mods. Like, there's this, cool new recent mod that we had on called Roots that has kind of been born in 1.9 and 1.10. So I guess, what do you think it is about these kind of, I guess, more isolated magic mods that gives them such a head start when it comes to new versions?
Compared to tech mods,
Yeah, like compared to the thermal expansions of the world.
I'd say probably the novelty. If you were to look at real world technology, eventually you're going to run out of ideas on how to skin a macerator. There are definitely notable exceptions. So, for instance, immersive engineering, it takes the multi blocks are best blocks to extreme that I quite like. But I think Magic mods have a bit more versatility in that regards because although you can have tech mods with vastly different mechanics, there comes a point where sometimes it just looks like a tech mod. Where if you compare the different, at least the major magic mods, Thaumcraft, Roots, Botania, Blood Magic, as well as Witchery, you can see that although they can be described as magic mods, they have vastly different ways about doing their business and vastly different applications as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with magic mods is, I mean, not only are they much more isolated, but also, like, for example, you might see Bob's Quick Pipe Fix as a mod on Curse, but you're likely not going to see Witchery Fix or Blood Magic Fix because I think the way people treat magic mods, they're much more of their own kind of distinct thing and less of this utility that other people add on to. It's more of like, I guess it's more of a unified vision. Like something like Blood Magic obviously will have add-ons, but the actual core mod, people I think view that more as a complete thing that doesn't necessarily need add-ons to be complete, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's also slightly with the point that it's hard to add to the progression of a magic mod. It's a lot easier to add different pipes, tools, and machines to technology mods because, for one, there's a lot more real world applicability. You can easily see that, hey, if I wanted to add a toilet to industrial crafts, you can do that because it's a lot easier to think of a toilet than some arcane device that automates your blood altar.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I guess it is kind of that real world thing, but at the same time, then you have like mods like immersive engineering, which cause so much hype because it's more of a steampunk or I guess retro tech and also realistic tech theme, which I guess people don't get as often in tech mods. With magic mods, we do have stuff like blood magic that really innovates. And you don't get that as much in tech mods, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but just by the nature of them, they're much more, I guess, grounded in reality. And to some people, that's more boring.
Well, there's that, and I also think it's because tech mods had their big growing period in 1.2 and previous versions.
Oh yeah,
For
tech it.
instance, yeah, Tekkit as well as tech mods in general, because Magic mods in 1.2, I think there was basically only Thaumcraft,
Hmm.
whereas there were a lot of different tech mods, and you could see a bunch of innovation in the tech mod sphere then. And I guess that the later versions, Magic mods, have been seen as the more innovative because they haven't grown as much as tech mods have in the past.
Yeah, that's true. I think like the whole concept of mod packs kind of got started with tech mods because people started sticking together mods they thought worked well together. And with magic mods, they can work well together, but they don't always because they're kind of meant to be their own thing. So I don't know. I think like I guess as newer versions have come around, this idea of standalone mod that maybe has a few add-ons but doesn't try to integrate with anything too heavily has become a lot more popular.
Yeah, it's especially with the tech mod side, since a lot of the tech mods use energy as a resource. If you can find some sort of good conversion or balancing for that energy, it's a lot easier to, for instance, if you wanted to make an ore processing plant, it's a lot easier to just do a bunch of tech mods and string them in a line, say macerating your iron ore and then washing it and then using a whole different mod to process it and sort it. I think there's a lot more places to add the compatibility in technology mods than it is magic mods.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to find a conversion for LP to V, for
Yeah, because
instance.
you just don't see people want to do that because like I don't know, like because the functionality is so different. Like someone might be like, oh, I want to transfer, I want to make my macerator work with my generator or something, but no one's gonna be like, I want to make my blood altar work with my witch's broom or something.
I have seen some fun add-ons. Unfortunately, well, can't really see it right now because Thaumcraft isn't updated. But Forbidden Magic added wands that would run on LP from a Soul Network, and let's just say it's not a very happy thing when you run out of LP with that wand.
Yeah, that sounds dangerous. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess from switching gears to kind of presentation, your mod now uses Unity style textures, which I believe are done by ULife. I guess how do you communicate your vision for the mod to someone else who's doing such like an important job like that?
Well, with ULife, basically, I try to put a work in progress texture for certain things. Well, let's actually jump back to how it started. Basically, when I was doing this 1.8 port of the mod, I wanted to try to add all these new ideas to the mod because Demon Will just came about. And Cyanide X and ULife, and at that time Bbolt, all came and said, "Hey, do you want to use our textures?" And it's like, "Sure, less work for me." So on the communication side, either I add a work in progress texture and I let them uh, have the vision of what the texture looks like, because ULife especially, he has a good grasp on all the stuff in Blood Magic already, that he tends to know how to make the textures fit with what it's actually doing as well as the rest of the mod. And sometimes I'd give a rough and, let me just say, horrible sketch in MS Paint to them to uh, like, for instance, the Demon Crucible, I gave a simple sketch to ULife and he gave me one iteration. I commented on it and then he did a few more iterations until we both decided this is the thing we want.
Like, yeah,
So it's a, yep.
I know with like one of the things Unity does is with some mods, it tries to make the textures incorporate the recipe. Like, oh, if this had a stick in it, you'll see where the stick is used on this texture. Is there any kind of that design philosophy going on with the blood magic textures?
Well, some of the things, it's actually the opposite, where they give me a good texture and it's like, okay, this was my original recipe. Let me rechange my recipe so it actually makes sense on this thing.
Oh wow, I never actually heard of it going the other way.
I've had one or two instances of that because a lot of my recipes, they are shapeless. For instance, the air reagent and stuff like that, in order to make the sigils, they're just four items inside of the Hellfire Forge. So it's hard to make a congruent shape out of a mishmash of four things.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess do you think like because textures are obviously really important to mod, and they kind of give it that iconic feel. I know, like, most people will probably agree that the textures, for Blood Magic now are better than the ones before. But do you think there's anyone who kind of misses that kind of style? Because sometimes, like for example, with Buildcraft, before that got a Unity texture, reset, some people really like the iconic look of those machines, even if they were kind of simplistic. Do you think that's the case with your mod?
My previous textures were horrible. And yes, I have had some people go, "Why are you using these textures? They're nothing like the original Blood Magic. Why can't you just go back to the textures for the slates, etc.?" I do get those people and I do understand them. However, I feel overall that the change to a more unified texture and me not just going randomly in GIMP and doing a bunch of strokes on the pad until it worked is better for the mod overall. Although I do kind of miss some of the textures, I have grown to like the new ones a lot more than the previous ones.
Yeah, like the thing with Unity that kind of impresses me, just it's facts. You see stuff like either people love it or hate it, but Unity is really good at, for the most part, not quite completely, but I think most people like the Unity textures because they're close, to the default vanilla style, and not only do they do that, but they add more detail to it, and they also help unify all these mods to make them not look quite the same, but look, I guess, organized together.
Well, it makes it look like they come from the same universe.
Right. Yeah, you don't, for example, like you don't have this really complicated 3D rendered model, like cough cough draconic evolution or something,
Oh,
with some 16 by 16 dirt texture or whatever.
yeah, and there are cases of people, and I do understand it. Heck, I don't use one myself, who just don't use texture packs because they like their default Minecraft look. One of the main texture packs in 1.2 that I love to use was Faithful. That simply upresed all the textures. So
Yeah.
you do have those people as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've been one of those people kind of myself. I typically try to stay away from texture packs, but more recently, I have been gravitating to stuff like Unity just by virtue of so many more mods now kind of using or supporting it. So I think that helps. I guess going back to 110 stuff, we have a lot of cool new mods for 110. Not only Magic, but we also have lots of utility stuff like JEI, and you also mentioned Guide API, though that was in 1.7 too. But do you feel like with stuff like JEI, which this basically new version of NEI, what's it like to kind of work with that and possibly integrate it with your mod?
Well, JEI is a lot more modder friendly than NEI was. NEI, I haven't actually done any of the direct compatibility. I always had someone that was willing to put in the effort and compose a pull request in order to add NEI integration. But JI was a lot easier in order to add any sort of integration. For instance, it can take like a bit of copying, pasting, and 4 lines of code difference, as well as the texture for the JEI recipes, in order to add a completely new recipe category into JEI.
Yeah,
So it's a lot more modder friendly. Users tend to won't notice the difference. There's probably a few interface improvements that they need him to improve on. However, probably they did improve them. However, I haven't found the configuration to enable them. But overall, I'd say that it's a lot more modder friendly. And judging by how many mods are actually just skipping right to it, is an indication.
yeah. I mean, I think actually stuff like the lack of widgets helps JEI because it doesn't try to be more than it is. It's just a recipe viewer, but it does that I think very well. So that's why I think we see so many 110 mods kind of working much better with that than with NEI. Because with NEI you had to I think you'd see in lots of kitchen sink packs there'd be at least like 3 or 4 NEI add-ons just to get all the recipes, and even then you probably wouldn't have all of them, but most of the recipe handlers working.
Also, I think modders, as well as the modding base, have been so used to NEI that suddenly not having it for 1.9 and 1.10 for the mods is a little too much. Therefore, people just went like, "Yeah, let's quickly get it, quick."
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really cool to see stuff like that, and I guess hopefully we see more innovation like that with other utilities. You know, maybe we'll see a crazy new mini map that completely changes the game. I don't know, but it's cool to see stuff like that, I think.
Yeah,
And
and it gives room. Sorry, go ahead.
I was no sorry. Yeah, well, yeah, I think it's just good for all not only users but all modders. You know, like I'm because lots of people play with stuff like Whaler or mini maps, so to have that I guess be improved is also good for the modders because they can not only integrate with it better, but just I'm sure lots of modders use it themselves if they play. Just everyone uses those mods, so the more innovation we have in those mods, the better for everyone.
Yeah, it also helps a bit with making the mod a bit more self-documented, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. Looking at recipes in the game or whatever,
Yeah,
definitely
and
a
you can
bonus.
also see which machine uses that recipe.
hmm Yeah, that's definitely helpful. But I guess looking towards the future, what kind of content can we expect from Blood Magic, and are you working on anything else?
Well, to answer the second question right away, I am not working on other mods. Blood Magic is kind of my baby, so to speak, and most of my idea power has been going to it. There have been a few, like two mods that I have tried to work on, especially because of the 1.8 hurdle. Like, must have been a year ago. Wow, 1.7 has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Anyway, Hemomancy I was trying to work on as kind of a spiritual successor to Blood Magic, where it was, for all intents and purposes, a combat focused magic mod. Uh, Spiritual successor to Blood Magic as well as Ars Magica because you'd use blood and mana. There's also another mod. I won't get into it, but it was called Quintessential. That didn't really get anywhere. But for what I'm planning in the mod in the future, as you can see, documentation, I need to try to button that up as much as possible. I'm going to be releasing a few updates to that book over the coming week and hopefully get everything at least started documentation so the cut and dry, hardly any fluff, this is what is type of documentation. Because writing the actual docs are more like writing a book. For future stuffs in the mod, there are a few different things I want to work on. One of them is the alchemy arrays that I have been teasing in some of my Blood Magic sneak peeks on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. Um, I'm trying to make basically simple utility um, magic blocks that don't make sense to. Let's try to put it a different way. It's kind of a stationary spell if you want to think of it this way. Like you have a movement array that shoves you in a certain direction, updraft array that launches you in the air, some simple low tier rituals, so to speak. Then I'm also focusing on augmenting the rituals, kind of like how I did in 1.7. But instead of using a reagent system, I'd be using the Demon Will aura system that is in the fourth tier of the mod in order to augment your rituals with demonic will. For instance, the magnetism ritual, you'd be able to increase its range as well as speed. The crushing ritual, you can add fortune, silk touch, adds a bunch of corrosive effects to it. And my idea is that every single ritual, apart from its current effect, you'll be able to add up to 5 more effects on each and every single ritual. And that's going to take a bit of work, and it's going to be one of those stretch goals in the next month or two. So, those are the immediate things that I am thinking of. There are a few other things that, if you want me to go into more detail about, I can.
Well, I think that's definitely pretty interesting. I guess what I've kind of been noticing is it looks like you're designing your mod from a or you have been designing your mod from a top-down perspective because obviously you started out with the end game content stuff and now you're working towards stuff like documentation and just lower level content that's also neat. That I guess that's kind of an interesting way to design your mod.
Well, originally, um, I did do more of a bottom up, at least to start with. So I started with Demon Will, got tier 1 and 2, buttoned up. Then I slowly introduced the rituals back to their former abilities, and I'm kind of more of, instead of a top down, it's kind of like a sideways push out. Now the documentation, yeah, I should have definitely worked on that from the beginning. However, Guide API wasn't quite up to snuff at that point, and I did have my video documentation, although not the best. People were able to consult that for at least the Demon Will stuff, since all the LP and ritual stuff basically didn't change
Hmm.
at that point.
Yeah, and there's always Direwolf.
There's always Starwolf in, just, if his users aren't sad at all the blood magic content in the week.
Yeah. Oh, enough magic. But yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. And I look forward to that. And I'm sure people watching this do as well. Thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a nice episode. And I guess do you have any closing thoughts?
Um, I think I basically gave all the thoughts that I can think of right now.
Awesome. The
Thank you very
thoughts.
much for having me.
It's been awesome. The thoughts have been depleted. Thank you all of you guys for watching. And two things before we go out. One, thank you for 400 subscribers. That's awesome. And two, there's a thing happening called the modding trials. I forget the exact dates, but I'm gonna have a link. Basically, if you're watching this, some of you might be modders. As well. So if you remember Mod Jam, it's a mod competition, the modding trials, and that is a thing that's going on. So there will be a link in the description for more info on that. But thank you so much for watching, and thank you Way of Time for coming on, and see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.